Hello there, and welcome to episode 3 of our journey through the book, Understanding Your Potential. And I hope that today's reflection will be useful to you and to all of us, even as we strive to be an asset to ourselves and to our world. Today, the focus is on chapter 2 and 3 of the book, as authored by Dr. Myles Munroe. And one key thing we find in the chapter 2 is that it helps us to begin to look at potential from the source of all creation. And one key thing is that potential is embedded in the source of whatever is becoming evident, in reference to that potential that we are describing. So the potential of a thing is related to its source. So oftentimes when we have the opportunity to meet someone and they expose us to a number of things they have created, your impression about the person could have an effect on their creation, whether they are artists or whether they are businessmen or whatever it is. The impression you have about the person who is the source of whatever creation there is could influence or give you an idea of how potent, how functional their invention would be. So the potential of a thing is related to its source. And this is what the chapter 2 helps us to capture, even as we try to understand what God has put in us, the whole lot that He has hidden in us, as we described and discussed in the previous chapter. The potential principle is something that we need to capture. And when we describe God as omnipotent, Dr. Miles helps us to see here that we are referring to him as the one who is always full of power, where omni means always and potent means full of power. So we literally are saying that God is always consistently all the time full of power, and that power is the power that enables him to set in motion that which beats our imagination, far above what we can think or even do. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly and above all for us because he is always full of power, and all potential, all possibilities are captured in him. So he is the principle of potential. And when we are able to understand from the source of all that we are, it helps us to proceed to have a good, you know, uh, understanding of our potential and how we can, you know, unravel that to the maximum. The source of everything is God Almighty. Everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will ever be is captured in Him. And when we go back into time and all the amazing creations and inventions that have come, you know, from the automobile, world into the world of IT and computing and all that there has ever been, that has made the living of man much easier. The world of internet and all those, inventions over time, we get to appreciate the fact that the genius of man is without limit, without bounds. And this is a reflection of the limitless capacity and potential of our God, who is the creator of man and all that there is. And we see from chapter 2 how in reflecting the creation process of God, we see from the beginning before anything was, God existed, and that even the beginning of time was captured in him. And so, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the beginning of time, the beginning of life on earth was already in him. And so, when he says that, let there be light, there was light already captured in him. He already had that thought, that idea, that image of what light should look like. And so when he speaks it forth, he is speaking forth what was already in him as potential. And then he gets to separate the light from the darkness. That is just a reflection of what is already in existence in him. And so when you bring it out, you are just, making evident what has already been captured in you as potential. And as someone who is a writer, I get to understand how before you even set out to write a content, and I do a lot of writing, content development, you would have set out what you want to write, and the ideas are already in mind. And so when you begin writing, you are just writing for what is in your mind. And as you are writing, you are shaping the content and the context of whatever idea you originally had. So God gives us an indication that whatever he has hidden in us as potential is there. What it takes is for us to work it out. To work it out is a process. And in the book, Dr. Myles tells us working it out is hard work. So when the scripture says that God spoke, God said, let there be light, God said, even to the point of creating man. In Genesis chapter 1, the verse 27, he says, let us make man in our own image and our own likeness. He already had in him this kind of man that was to be created in his own image and after his own likeness. The blueprint was already there. Now let us bring forth what is already captured in us, and it should be just as us, just like us. And in that speaking of all that God did, it was hard work. And we see that captured, in Dr. Myles's explanation of spoke as hard work. And we see here, so spoke was a process. What God spoke into visibility began as an idea in his mind. God first conceived in his mind what he wanted to create. He didn't just say, I want this. And the prophet Isaiah tells us that God created the earth by first planning its foundation. By first planning its foundation. By first planning its foundation. And so I would want us to read exactly what is there in Isaiah 48, the verse 13. And it says, it was my hand that laid the foundations of the earth, my right hand that spread out the heavens above. When I call out the stars, they all appear in order. So he had pre-programmed what the stars should look like, what the foundations should look like, what the structure of the world and the earth should look like. So when he calls them out, they appear in order. He had planned the foundations of the earth. When God was ready to speak, it was just a matter of taking what was in the plan and putting it on the site. What plan do you have? What are the ideas that you have in mind? What are the ideas that you are putting together? Spoke was a process, and that process is not only reflected in the creation, It is reflected in the idea that birthed forth the creation. God laid the groundwork for the earth and spread out the heavens. He created the sun to shine during the day and the moon and stars at night. He gave every star a name. He ordered clouds to fill the sky and breezes to blow. He made the waves to roll in the sea. He sent rain to the earth and grass to cover the hillside. Thunder and lightning were created by his command. Hail and sleet were formed by his word. A wool-like blanket of snow he produced for winter. And all of these were captured in God's imagination. And so when he says, let there be, it was just a reflection of what he had already created within himself, coming forth as reality. And that is why, I understand and appreciate so much when Hebrews 11 verse 1 says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, because there is potential in the one who has promised us. And all that we need is to be able to see that although we do not see it, the potential that is in us is real. The evidence of things not seen. So sometimes we find it difficult to believe in ourselves and to trust in the capacity or ability of ourselves and others because we have not yet seen certain results. But not seeing certain results does not imply that the potential is not there. The potential principle tells us that in the seed there is a tree, and in that tree are the flowers, and in that, so there is something that is hidden in there, even if we do not yet see. The imagination, the ideas are important as the process of bringing forth our potential takes shape. God was full of imagination. He says he was pregnant with many thoughts. His thoughts became ideas, and the ideas became images. Everything that is came out of God as he spoke those images. The unseen became visible. The invisible became visible. God speaking was much like the contractions of a woman in labor. With effort, he pushed out every detailed creation. He pushed out every detailed creation that was in the plan. Then God began organizing the things as they appeared. So let there be light, and there was light. And he separates the light from the darkness and calls the day, the light day, and the darkness night. And so the idea gave birth to the creation, and then he put in order, shaped everything as he went about the creation. He was busy as he set them about, organizing and reorganizing. Then finally he says, this is good. He looks at the outcome of the process and says that this is good. God didn't create the world by just thinking the whole thing into being. He worked it into being. And this is important for us. A lot of us think that just because God has said we have potential, just because we are supposed to believe that we are valuable and worth it, even when people do not see it, means that we can just sit down and just be thinking and having all the big ideas. It takes working it out. Speaking it out was a process, and that process was hard work. And that is why, as we see in the book, God rested on the seventh day. By the seventh day, God finished the work he had been doing. He was doing some work. What work are you doing with the ideas that you have, with all the thoughts that come to mind? The potential will not be seen until there is a work that is being done with the ideas, with the images that had been created in the mind. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work, and God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Genesis 2:2-3. Spoke must be a fairly serious thing. If God, who is almighty and all powerful, omnipotent, always full of power, had to rest after creation, then spoke it must have been a very hard work. So speaking it out in faith is not all about speaking it out. There is a process. Spoke it is a process, and that process is hard work. And it is after finishing that hard work that we can say that indeed it is time to rest. So Paul says that I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. He had done the work. His potential had been brought out to the full. And so he had now the confidence and the satisfaction of saying that I have fought the good fight. I have run my race. God rested on the seventh day because spoke it was hard work. Spoke it was a process. When creation was completed, God rested. Why are you resting when you are not done with creating the world that God has designed you to create? And the work of creation is not yet complete. God has given us the license to continue creating. And so all the inventions and all the things that have come into existence is just a reflection of that capacity and ability to create that God has planted in man. And we have a share in that creation story, that we would continue as individuals, that our source is God, who is all powerful, omnipotent, always full of potential. We, as a reflection of him, knowing that the potential of a thing is in the source. And if we, as Ephesians 2:10 says, we are God's workmanship, we are his masterpiece. If that is the case, then we have to continue the work of creation, the process of speaking and doing as individuals that are connected to the source. And this is what we find in chapter 2. The key principles: everything that was and is was in God. God is the source of all potential. All things were formed at God's command, so the invisible became visible. God planned the world in his mind before speaking it into existence. So before speaking, he had a plan in his mind. What are you planning? What are the ideas you are brooding over before you step out to act? A lot of people take the action before thinking about the consequence, before thinking about the process. You would have committed yourself to failure even before you know it. Now, chapter 3 takes us into another dimension. Who are you? Having known that the source of every creation gives an indication of its potential and that all potential is locked up in its source, who are you? Who you are is related to where you come from. And we have established that we all are output of God. We come from him as our source. And if our source is omnipotent, then it tells us that we also have the potential to always create, to always come up with, inventions, to always come up with the best that there is, because there's always room to do more, to give more. We are always full of power. And it's interesting, just as we discussed in the previous chapter, from the introduction into the chapter 1, where we spoke about how sometimes there is potential hidden in something, in someone, but people cannot see it. So just like the sculptor in the introduction, who saw that tree that was cut down, and he saw in those junk wood, according to the owner, he saw in those junk wood something precious, and was able to carve out a bed that the owner of those junk trees came to buy at a high cost. That's the same way God sees us, and he sees us as his masterpiece. So many may look at us and may not see our worth, may not see the potential that we have to become the prime minister, to become the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, to become the inventor, to become that individual that sets our world, in shape. But it is important for us to know that who we are is connected to our source, who is God. When the world dumps you and rejects you, and you land on a garbage heap of the world, God walks along and picks you up. He looks deep within you and sees a person of great worth. So, who are you taking your report from? Is it people that do not see beyond what you are and what you can be? Or God who sees what you are and also sees what you can be? You are not junk. You are not useless. You are not worthless. There are many people who are being passed by because others don't see what is in them. But God has shown me what's in me, and I know it is in you too. My job is to stop you and say, can you see what's in you? Do you know your potential? Do you know that you are not just someone born in a ghetto over the hill? There's a wealth of potential in you. A sculptor sees so differently. They say Michelangelo used to walk around a block of marble for days, just walking around it, talking to himself. First, he would see things in the rock, then he would go and take them out. Insight like that of a sculptor is seen in the Bible. When the world dumps you and rejects you, God looks deep in you and sees a person of great value. And we see a reflection of this in how God called David the shepherd boy. And when Samuel was sent to the home of Jesse, we see Jesse parading his sons, the handsome, tall, curly, and strong and muscular, all of them coming to line up because to him, Jesse, these were the people, these were the sons he had that could stand as potential kings. And all of them were rejected by God. And when someone asks, is there any other person? Jesse did not even have the thought that there could be a possibility that my last born stood a chance. So he says that okay, there's one out there in the fields, well, there's not much he could be used for, he's just a shepherd, boy, the last born, nothing really. These are the ones that really, have the qualifications. And when Samuel asked that, call forth this boy, when he was brought, Samuel said, this is actually the one. I think I have found the guy I'm looking for, Samuel said. And one key thing we pick from this chapter is the fact that God chooses busy people. What are you about doing? And it goes back to the ideas. And as we mentioned, spoke it was process. Spoke it was hard work. What are you about doing with your ideas, with your talent, with your abilities? It's not about sitting down. It is about being busy doing something worthwhile. Notwithstanding how much it is that you are able to do, whether little or big, no matter what it is, are you busy about using your potential? That is how you work it out to the fullest. Most of us are like Jesse. We look, but we don't see. Were you the black sheep in your family? Has your family told you that you are nobody? Have you been put off and put out and told so many times that you will amount to nothing that you have begun to believe it? Do you feel like the black sheep? You are probably the one God is waiting for in the house. Just like David, you are probably the one that God is waiting for in the house. God sees things deep within you that others can't see because He's the one that created you as His masterpiece. They look at you and see a nobody, God looks at you and sees a worthwhile somebody. You may spend your whole life trying to compete with others and trying to prove yourself to them and still feel that there's a void. You are still feeling like nobody. And this chapter helps you to see that it is time to free yourself because your source, the one that you came out of, the one that designed you, the one that has the manual of your life, sees something great in you. And you don't have to try to be somebody because you are somebody. All that it takes is for you to understand the source of your potential. Knowing the source of your potential as God Almighty gives you an indication that you have all that it takes to live out your best and to become what you could ever be, the potential principle at work in you. You came out of God. You came out of God. So this is the main thing we find in the chapter 2. Who are you? And coming to that realization that you are coming out of God and you are God's masterpiece. Your source is Him. And all things, as we have mentioned over and over again in this discussion, have a reflection of their source in them. And so if there's something wrong with the object, with the instrument, with the invention, who do you go to? You go back to the inventor or whoever has been certified to be able to work on that invention to function well. Other people may have all sorts of opinions about you, but if there's something that is limiting you, your source is God. And He's the one that tells you that notwithstanding the limitations and the slow progress, you have capacity because this is how I designed you to be. I designed you to be a prophet to the nations. Even before the foundations of the world, I chose you and I ordained you. Before the foundations of the world, I set out a plan. I had an idea. I had an agenda. You are sourced out of God. You are made in His image and His likeness. And so you want to focus on the inventor and not the invention. When people are looking at you, they may be looking at the invention. What they do not see is the inventor who has set all things in course for you to be able to live out your full potential. You don't want to focus on the invention and forget what the source, the inventor, is saying. The key to understanding life is in the source of life, not in the life itself. Many of the inventions man has produced would be misunderstood if only the invention were considered and not the intention of the inventor. In other words, the man who created the refrigerator had in his mind what it was supposed to be used for. He did not intend that it should be used for a trap in the backyard for a kid to be locked in and die from suffocation. Even though thousands of children have died in refrigerators, that was not the inventor's intention. God's intention for you are great. God's intention for you is for you to become all that you can become. There's potential notwithstanding the level that you are in now. And remember, we mentioned from the first chapter that what you have succeeded in is no longer potential. What you can succeed in going forward is potential. Whatever you have achieved is no longer potential. What you could become is potential. And notwithstanding some of the negatives, some of the limitations, some of the blockades that may come our way, it does not defeat the original intention of the inventor. All inventions may come in and have certain faults, but it doesn't defeat the primary purpose of their creation. You have part of God in you, and if He's described as omnipotent, full of potential, then you are also full of potential. God saw in Gideon a mighty man of valor. God saw in Jeremiah a man who was called to be a prophet to the nations. God saw in Peter and man who would be the rock. God sees in you more than men and even yourself can see. You want to go back to your source and you want to rely on what God says concerning you. This brings us to the end of the chapter 3, and I hope that it has been useful. The principles of chapter 3 are summed up in these. All things have the same component and essence as their source. When God created human beings, he spoke to himself. You will never know yourself by relating to the creation, but only to the creator. Your potential is much greater than what you are right now. What you are right now is not the ultimate. What you are right now does not define what you are supposed to be. The potential principle says that not what is, but what could be. Your potential is limited only by God, not others. And finally, God sees Christ in you, and Christ in you is your hope of glory. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Stay positive and stay blessed. Bye bye.